For what reason would three guys have committed one of the most heinous atrocities in modern history? How does a verbal and skill-based rap battle turn into an unthinkable act of violence? How can one survivor overcome insurmountable obstacles to tell her story? A peaceful, deserted property in Columbus, Georgia, was the scene of a heinous murder on New Year's Day in 2014 that left even seasoned detectives wondering about the limits of human depravity. Three males were infuriated by a young woman's skill and self-assurance during a freestyle rap war. Instead of surrendering, they sought ruthless retaliation that stunned the country. The victim, who was outnumbered and overpowered, endured constant assault after being forced to drive to a distant place at gunpoint. After being beaten and shot 10 times, she was abandoned. Her assailants thought they had permanently silenced her. However, they were mistaken. This is a confrontation with difficult realities rather than only the tale of a crime. What encourages the sense of entitlement that results in such horrible behavior? Why doesn't society shield women from these atrocities? Above all, how can we make sure justice is done by amplifying voices like hers? We'll look at the egos and entitlement that motivated the attack, the tenacity of a survivor who resisted silence, and the quest for justice that necessitated accountability as we dig deeper into this tale. Although hearing this story is difficult, we must comprehend it. Welcome to the Crime Hour. The victim, Brielle Saunders, and the three men who made her life into a nightmare, Robert Johnson, Katori Glover, and Joey Guerin, must be met in order to fully comprehend the complexity of this case. Young and energetic, Brielle Saunders had aspirations as great as her talent. Because of her father, a gospel singer who taught her the value of rhythm, lyrics, and narrative, she grew up surrounded by music in Columbus, Georgia. Brielle gained respect in a male-dominated field by becoming a local celebrity in freestyle rap fights by the time she was a teenager, because to her witty banter and skillful lyrics, she was not only gifted, she also lacked fear. Everywhere she appeared, her self-assurance made her stand out and attracted audiences ready to hear her poetic prowess. But for Brielle, rap was more than simply a means of getting notoriety. It was a means of motivating others, connecting with them, and demonstrating that a woman's voice in hip-hop was just as strong as a man's. Her self-assurance brought her to Garden Drive, a well-known gathering place for local rappers, on the evening of the incident. She came to compete, show off her skills, and experience the excitement of freestyle rap. She was unaware that the wrong people would become envious and angry due to her success and strength. In the aftermath, however, it became evident. Brielle would survive thanks to her tenacity, which she had developed over the years of conquering obstacles. Let's now discuss the three men, Robert Johnson, Katori Glover, and Joey Guerin, who permanently altered Brielle's life. The 25-year-old ringleader, Robert Johnson, has a lengthy legal past. His criminal history included a conviction for coercing an 8-year-old girl into unimaginable activities when he was just 13 years old, among other concerning behaviors. The victim had willingly followed him, he claimed, providing a troubling window into his distorted sense of entitlement. Johnson flourished as an adult by intimidating others with his physical presence and scathing remarks. Though quieter, 26-year-old Katori Glover was just as threatening. Glover was known for being quiet, yet his most concerning quality was his unpredictable nature. He had a history of stealing and assault, and his impetuous behavior frequently led to heated arguments. The youngest, 22-year-old Joey Guerin, was a follower in need of approval. His fears did not lessen his complicity. Rather, his urge to prove himself frequently resulted in dangerous and damaging behavior. These three men were a dangerous combination. Guerin was the willing collaborator, Glover was the enforcer, and Johnson was the leader. They were drawn together that evening on Garden Drive by their mutual craving for recognition and power. But the night became fatal because of their incapacity to cope with rejection. Brielle's triumph in the rap battle challenged their egos in addition to being a defeat. Retaliation was necessary for such a task in their environment, where control was paramount. Similar to many underground rap scenes, the Garden Drive party had begun with enthusiasm and vigor. Music, laughing, and the fast-paced exchanges of freestyle combat filled the house. Brielle was enthralling the audience with her self-assurance and talent. Guerin, Glover, and Johnson were among those observing. They initially appreciated her talent. However, their awe gave way to annoyance as Brielle maintained her dominance. Brielle was in her car with the three men at the end of what had begun as a competitive evening. The mood appeared cheerful as they resumed freestyling until it abruptly changed. Johnson and Glover both drew their weapons and pointed them at Brielle. She was told to drive by the males. Her heart racing, she obeyed. Tension increased as the automobile drove through the streets. After growing irritated, Glover pushed her into the passenger seat and took over the wheel. Due of its remoteness, they elected to drive to an abandoned lot on Far Road. As they told Brielle to get out of the car, there was an overwhelming quiet. They laughed cruelly at her cries for pity. She was no longer a person to them. Instead, she served as a vehicle for their anger. Although what transpired was a nightmare, Brielle's bravery and tenacity would eventually guarantee that her narrative would not finish there. What transpired was a heinous assault that would later leave the courtroom in stunned silence. Brielle's dignity was taken away piece by piece when she was made to strip at gunpoint. She was humiliated by the males, who alternately attacked her sexually and physically. They used their guns as humiliating instruments as well as weapons, causing her to endure unspeakable agony as the cold metal pressed against her skin. Brielle would later testify in court, her voice shaking. "They were having a good time. They treated me as if I were a piece of cake." Even though the brutality she experienced was intended to shatter her spirit, Brielle managed to maintain a semblance of optimism that she would somehow make it through this nightmare. As the males repeatedly assaulted her, their laughter reverberated throughout the empty lot. It was a game to them. It was a battle for Brielle's life. They weren't done by the time the attack ended. With vague objectives but evident intent, they tried to push her into the trunk of her car. Brielle sensed a chance at that very moment. With all the remaining strength she mustered, she escaped and fled. She simply ran without thinking. Behind her, bare feet thudded on the chilly earth while gunfire echoed. One bullet after another tore into her body as Johnson and Glover fired. Brielle received 10 blows. The weight of her wounds caused her body to fall to the earth. Even so, she continued to fight. As the men drew closer, she pretended to be dead and breathed heavily. They grabbed a gas can from the trunk, poured gasoline on her, and set her ablaze, thinking their job was done. As the men ran away, certain they had obliterated all proof of their crime, flames engulfed her corpse. She slithered inch by inch toward safety, despite the excruciating pain of her burns and gunshot wounds. Despite the fact that her body was broken, she remained determined to live. Eventually, someone saw her weak cries and phoned for assistance. Brielle's life was on the line when she was taken to the hospital. Her survival stunned the doctors, who described it as nothing short of miraculous. Brielle had been shot and coated in burns, yet she was still alive. Her quest for justice began with what transpired in that lot. Keep reading to see how Brielle's bravery will be demonstrated in the coming days and make sure her assailants were held accountable. The wheels of justice started to spin as Brielle Saunders fought for her life in the hospital. Lieutenant Dion, a seasoned investigator with a wealth of expertise investigating violent crimes, was assigned the case. But this instance was unique, even for Dion. It was evident from the violence first responders and medical personnel reported that this would be one of the most horrific investigations of his professional life. Dion reached the location on Far Road, a desolate and unsettling area that still had the scars from the previous night's terror. Debris and burned grass created a bleak scene. Tire tracks, bullet shells, and pieces of clothes were silent witnesses to the carnage that had taken place. Every detail was meticulously recorded by forensic investigators who gathered evidence that would eventually be essential to achieving justice. Partygoers from Garden Drive started to come forward and describe how they saw Brielle go with 3 men. They recognized Joey Guerin, Katori Glover, and Robert Johnson. What Brielle had managed to say from her hospital bed, her voice calm in spite of the unbearable pain, matched their descriptions. The case against the offenders was strengthened by forensic evidence. Their involvement was unequivocally proved by DNA taken from Brielle's body and the location. Dion's crew put forth a lot of effort to piece together what happened that evening. Johnson, Glover, and Guerin were promptly arrested after the culprits were identified. Their stories started to fall apart as they were being questioned. Each individual attempted to assign blame by asserting that the incidents were mutually agreed upon. But the overwhelming evidence exposed their lies. An unquestionable picture of their crimes was presented by Brielle's testimony, witness statements, and forensic analysis. Their desperation was captured on interrogation video. Johnson insisted that Brielle had voluntarily taken part, displaying icy haughtiness. When faced with DNA proof, Glover faltered despite his stoicism. The youngest and most insecure Guerin lost it under duress, and his erratic behavior and frantic fidgeting further implicated him. The town was rocked by the news of their arrests. Outrage increased once the attack's specifics were made public. People were appalled by the savagery of the crime and the offender's lack of regret. Community people demanded justice and made sure Brielle's voice would not be stifled at rallies in her support. In retrospect, Lieutenant Dion described the case as one of the most vicious he had ever seen. He did, however, commend Brielle's extraordinary bravery and his team's unwavering resolve to hold her perpetrators accountable. The stage was set for a courtroom battle that would reveal the depths of the men's depravity while they awaited trial. The courtroom became hushed as Brielle Saunders took the stand. Despite everyone's attention, she maintained her composure. She was committed to making sure those who had attacked her were held responsible. Her testimonies were heartbreaking. Her strength was evident in every word as she described the events of that night in graphic detail. Brielle Saunders talked about the nightmare she had with unflinching strength. She described the icy air of the deserted lot, the agonizing anguish of the attack, and the laughing that filled the car before it became threats. Her voice was firm but shaky as she said, "They tried to throw me in the trunk like I was trash. I believed I was going to pass away. However, I ran. I had to flee." As Brielle described being shot 10 times, poured in gasoline, and set on fire, the courtroom erupted in gasps. She went on, "They didn't think I'd survive. But I did, and the reason I'm here now is that I didn't let them win." By portraying Joey Guerin, Katori Glover, and Robert Johnson as guys who had made horrible errors but were still capable of turning their lives around, the defense lawyers tried to argue for their client's mercy. Glover's lawyer, Adam DeVere, contended, "My client has shown a great deal of regret. I request that this court take into account his prospects for rehabilitation because he is prepared to accept responsibility for his conduct." However, prosecutor Sedana Daly skillfully undermined the defense's claims, providing indisputable proof of the defendants' premeditated brutality and lack of regret. Daly claimed that these males had dehumanized Brielle in addition to attacking her. Their acts were heartless, ruthless, and purposeful. They didn't be kind to her, and now they don't deserve it. Daly drew attention to the interrogation recordings in which the men asserted that Brielle had given her assent, in spite of the overwhelming evidence that she had been coerced at gunpoint. As additional evidence of their risk, she cited Johnson's juvenile record, which included a previous sexual offense. Daly said, "They treated her like an object, disposable and insignificant." The message this court sends must be clear. Such evil will not go unpunished. The seriousness of the case was evident in every syllable of Judge Art Smith III's decision. Guerin received 5 life sentences plus 70 years, while Glover and Johnson each received 6 life sentences plus 95 years. They received the most severe punishments permitted by law for their offenses, which included rape, sodomy, serious violence, kidnapping, and more. Judge Smith used harsh language when speaking to the defendants. In my experience as a superior court judge, I have heard some of the most ruthless testimony in this case. You handled Miss Saunders as if she were disposable and her life was worthless. However, she disproved your assertion. We are here today because of her resolve to live, and now you have to deal with the fallout from your inhumanity. The gallery erupted in cheers as Brielle's family and supporters felt a wave of relief. The guys who attempted to ruin Brielle's life would now live out the rest of their days in prison, fulfilling the community's desire for justice. This trial demonstrated Brielle's extraordinary bravery in addition to her legal triumph. She made sure her attackers could never hurt anyone again by telling her story and confronting them. One thing became evident as the courtroom cleared. This case was about much more than just justice. It was a struggle for accountability, decency, and the enduring strength of perseverance. The way Brielle Saunders recovered was very amazing. She needed months of intense treatment and rehabilitation due to her physical injuries, which included serious burns and 10 gunshot wounds. But it would take a lot longer for the emotional wounds to heal. Brielle found strength in the steadfast support of her family and community. They came together in support of her, demonstrating that even though her body had been damaged, her soul had not been. Her narrative had an impact well beyond her own path. The case raised awareness to the widespread violence against women and served as a rallying cry for justice. Leaders in the community demanded tougher punishments for violent offenders and more protections for those who are most in need. Brielle's courage encouraged many others to speak up, making her narrative about empowerment rather than just suffering. One community leader stated, "This case serves as a reminder of the value of justice and the tenacity of the human spirit." Brielle's bravery demonstrates to us that despite unspeakable suffering, survival and success are achievable. However, her narrative also makes us wonder, what can society do to stop this kind of suffering? How do we ensure that those who commit crimes are held accountable and that no one else has to go through what Brielle did? Awareness, responsibility, and solidarity with survivors are the solutions. Although justice cannot take away the suffering, Brielle's strength serves as a potent reminder that such wickedness will not go unpunished. Her experience serves as a reminder of the extreme bravery required to speak up and survive. The tale of Brielle Saunders is one of justice, resiliency, and hope, a tribute to the resilience of the human spirit. What can we learn from the story of Brielle? How can we support survivors and better safeguard those who are at risk? If this story touched you, please leave a comment below and think about subscribing for more stories that examine the victory of justice and the enduring strength of resilience. By working together, we can guarantee that these tales are heard and that their lessons are never forgotten. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like, share it with others, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more impactful stories. Your support means everything to us. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.